Welcome again to Control Budget, some basics of our budgetary control. Starting off with some basics of your control budgets are going to impact how transactions are budgetary controlled and reported. So they are going to regulate budgetary control, only not encumbrance accounting. The control budget is going to define the ledger and or projects that you can want to control spending against and the rules to use during budgetary control. So the rules stipulate what chart of account segments, budget periods, currencies that you want to control against along with a control level. So remember, do you want to stop transaction processing or not? And any exceptions to the control levels and also tolerances. We can also define override for insufficient funds or if we are trying to budgetary control something in a closed period. Budgetary control is not retroactive. What does it mean? You have to finalize control budget before transactions entry such as BR, POs and invoice creation begins as budgetary control cannot be performed retroactively. If budgetary control implementation time frame is after procurement go live, consider enabling budgetary control at procurement go live with a control budget at track control level, details account and the monthly calendar to capture the transaction processed. Control budget can be changed to advisory or absolute control level later. If budgetary control and encumbrance accounting is implemented after transaction entry, you can choose to cancel and re-enter transactions and enter initialization commitment obligation balances. Such initialization balances don't affect linking of underlying transactions. I need also to mention something before going to managing control budgets. Before we start creating our budgetary control, if you are implementing the procure to pay process and you don't to plan on implementing budgetary control or encumbrance accounting until after the initial go live, you should still consider turning on budgetary control and or encumbrance accounting for your ledger business unit. And you define a detailed control budget at a track control level prior to the initial go live. يبقى you have to choose the control level as a track prior to the initial go live. This is because budgetary control and encumbrance account cannot be performed on requisitions, purchase order, receipts and invoice retroactively. Again, once these transactions are entered and processed without budgetary control or encumbrance accounting, you cannot apply budgetary control or encumbrance accounting to them later on. However, if you have a detailed control project with track control level in place before you begin entering transactions, you can later change the control level from track to absolute or advisory when you are ready to use budgetary control or encumbrance accounting. If you are using budgetary control from go live, then make sure that you activate all control budgets at go live prior to transaction entry. Because, as I say, if you activate a control budget after the transactions are entered, those transactions aren't captured by the control budget. If you are implementing budgetary control after go live or after transactions are entered, you might need to enter balances to initialize the beginning commitment or obligations. Regarding managing control budgets, as I mentioned, a control budget defines the ledger and or projects that you want to control spending against and the rules to use during budgetary control. You can see here that this is where we will essentially put in those rules when we are going in to create our control budget, because we will have a calendar, we will decide on our control level. We will decide whether we are checking projects. What are the segments that we are using for our budgetary control? Are they the same as the general ledger, or are we using a subset of our general ledger chart of accounts segments? Are we using any hierarchies? Are you going to allow any override rules? Maybe if there are insufficient funds, can we request an override? And then there are any exceptions to the main control level within our budgetary control budget? So there is quite a lot in here that's going to control how your transactions are budgetary controlled by this particular budget that you are setting up. So you need to think about your spending controls, your reporting needs, because you may require multi-control budget to be defined, but you can link the control budget to minimize your data entry. If you have detailed control budget for your lowest level inquiry and reporting, you could then link one or more summary control budget to the detailed control budget. When you load your data in the detailed budget, it will populate the information for your summary control budgets, because your summary control budgets will be sourced from that detailed control project. So one detailed control project can have one or more summary control budgets associated with it, but not vice versa. And you need to define a control budget structure for each control budget. So regarding for your segments, for example, here we seeing fund, department and account. See you in the next lecture.